Not everything that you ever find will be immediately identifiable, and for many things it would take hours, days, weeks, months, and even years. In April, I found these, but they weren't in this state because in April these were juveniles and very different to what they are now. Back in April of this year, I visited a local garden centre, one that I regularly go to during the winter or colder months of the year, and vigorously turn over the pots and look underneath. Quite often I find a myriad of various invertebrates, and among those myriads were these. At the time when I filmed these, I had no idea of what these pallid millipedes were. I struggled to find an ID, even going through keys. I thought they would be quite easy. And then something twigged in the dark recesses of my brain, and I suddenly realised why I couldn't identify these millipedes. It's because they were immature. Well, they've grown a bit now. The same millipedes are in here and are in need of being returned. They're now mature, and I kept them and grew them on just so that I could determine the identification and just to make sure that the species that I thought it was actually right. Well, these are all now very much grown up, and it's been an interesting and quite frankly rewarding few months spent watching these grow with successive molts. They eventually darkened and grew into the millipedes you see now, and the identification of Oxidus gracilis stands as one of the important things. If you don't know what something is, quite often you can grow them on if they're in a caterpillar or other larval stage, and it is, as I've mentioned, a very rewarding pastime. And I'll admit also that millipedes are very easy to grow on. In terms of length now, these are probably about 30 millimeters in length. The females are larger than the males. The obvious male is the one on the right of the screen now, but I have a feeling that there's two males in here. They're very different, certainly in terms of coloration, from the state they were in April, when they were incredibly pallid. I must admit that when I first found them, I was very excited at the prospect of these, and although they turned out to be Oxidus gracilis, I must admit also to being a tad disappointed. But there again, this is still the second record for Nottinghamshire, and today I'm going to return these back to the garden centre from whence they came. They're not native to the UK, but rather than kill these, I'm returning them back to where they originated from, and they will do no harm to any other millipedes found in the garden centre habitat. And quite often, many of the millipedes that you do find in garden centres are all non-native anyway. So it's been an interesting lesson. Nice to find a second site for Oxidus gracilis in Nottinghamshire, and it is one of the most northerly sites we have in the UK, and it shows how useful it is to grow things on. These have been so easy to keep. And just in case you're wondering what kind of setup you need in order to grow millipedes on, well, it is, as I've mentioned, very easy to do, very simple, and they don't take up any room. For the 4 that I brought back from the garden centre at Worksop, I've kept them in this container, just a simple square plastic container, a little bit of substrate on the bottom, a few sort of flakes and pieces of bark for the millipedes to hide under, and I've just fed them either on cucumber or lettuce, and these preferred the sort of fleshier parts of lettuce, and that's it. I've kept them moist, took the lid off occasionally just to let a bit of fresh air in, and that's all the conditions that these have needed in the 3 months that they've been in my possession. But time for them to move home. They're being evicted.